Well, a lot of you have already heard the sad news that yesterday, as of this recording, Peter Marshall, actor, comedian, singer, as well as the master of the Hollywood Squares, passed away at the age of 98. And he's one of the last classic game show hosts that was living. And there's fewer now. And he was one of the people I grew up watching. I used to watch the Hollywood Squares all the time, like a lot of people did. He hosted it for 15 years, and that was the show I knew him by for so many years. I didn't realize until years later he was also an actor and singer. What was interesting was my sister loved the movie Annie, the 1982 film that starred Albert Finney as Daddy Warbucks, Aileen Quinn as Annie, and Carol Burnett as Miss Hannigan. And my sister used to play the record from that movie like you wouldn't believe. And I remember the song, You're Never Fully Dressed Without a Smile. So I decided to look at the record and see who sang what. And when I saw that, it said Peter Marshall, I thought, is that the same Peter Marshall from the Hollywood Squares? And sure enough, a couple months later, I finally saw the film myself. My sister saw it in the theater. I saw it on cable. And sure enough, it was Peter Marshall. I'm like, wow, I didn't know he was a singer too. Of course, he had kind of like that 1940s, hey, hobo man, hey, dapper Dan, kind of like that sound they used to have on radio back in the 20s, 30s, or 40s. But it was like, wow. And then shortly after the Hollywood Squares was canceled, and just a couple months after Paul Lynde passed away, Peter was on a show, I think it was AM Los Angeles here in Southern California. And he told several stories, like one time Wally Cox rescued one of the celebrities who laughed so hard that she almost fell out of her chair and almost fell down, a couple of stories. And then also he said that the reason Paul Lynde was the center square, it had nothing to do with ego or, okay, I'm the star of this show. He said that Paul Lynde thought that the center square would be the safest place to be in the event of an earthquake. And about 15 years later, the second edition of the Encyclopedia of TV Game Shows was published. And they had the debut of the book at the Barnes & Noble in Encino. Peter Marshall was one of the stars there that night, along with Wink Martindale, Art James, Bern Bennett, who is the longtime announcer of Beat the Clock. You also had Peter Tamarkin of Press Your Luck. Randy West was there. Jack Nars, Art James, Ralph Story. And I had Peter, of course, autograph the picture himself on the set of the Squares, and they had some fun facts on the show. And among their Did You Know was in 1971, shortly after the Sylmar quake, there was an aftershock during a taping of Squares. And they said that all the stars left the square, got out of the building, and exited, except for Paul Lynde. He just remained there in his square until the building was cleared and everybody came back. So that was kind of an interesting story. Peter Marshall had a website for many years called boysinger.com, and he sang a lot of pop standards. And last year I interviewed Chuck Southcott. He, longtime program director of KGIL, as well as several other stations, including KMPC. And he programmed the Music of Your Life radio network for many years. I worked there during its early days before Peter was one of the on-air personalities. And he said that Peter was on there, was a great guy to work with. Plus, he said that Peter sounded like somebody, his brother-in-law. Now, if you want to find out what brother-in-law that was, listen to the Chuck Southcott interview here on the YouTube channel and find out. And he says that Pete's voice sounded a lot like his brother-in-law's voice. And of course, his brother-in-law was married to Joanne Drew, Pete's older sister. And oftentimes Pete was described as Joanne Drew's brother. Well, there's a picture, I'm sure it's online, but it's also in I think the Encyclopedia of TV Game Shows, where Hollywood Squares had this special T-shirt made up with a tic-tac-toe board, and it's Joanne Drew wearing it, and on it, it says Peter Marshall's sister, kind of as an inside joke because he was always known as Joanne Drew's brother. Peter is also involved in a lot of charity work. He loved to raise money for various causes. This picture of him and Art Linkletter is from 1996, and it's from the studios of radio station 99.5 KKLA in Los Angeles. And it was a 12-hour radiothon that was produced by Chuck Southcott and presented by Larry Vanderveen. Chuck helped produce it, and Larry Vanderveen was the one who put it on. It was to raise money for research on a certain medical condition. I think it was epilepsy, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember, but it was a great night. I did get a picture with Gary Owens that night, helping him out when he was on, but I never got to meet Mr. Linkletter, unfortunately. My friend Lisanne did get to meet him and got to interview him. So Art Linkletter, another legend, along with Peter Marshall. This picture I found just recently, and I was like, I want to get this to Peter. So I contacted Adam Nediff, who I've interviewed before, and he says, you know what? Give it to Shelley Herman, who we've also interviewed here on the show, and she received it, and Peter did get that picture. So I'm so glad that he and Lori got to see that photo with Art Linkletter. I met Pete 3 times. The first time was at the Encyclopedia of TV game show signing. The second time was at the signing of his book, Backstage with the Original Hollywood Square. That was in the summer of 2002. And I decided to bring a camera with me because I've been to other events like the 1995 event. I did not bring my camera to. I wished I had, looking back, but I decided, I'm going to bring it this time. And I got to meet a bunch of celebrities there that were signing autographs, including Harvey Korman. Joanne Worley was there. So too was Gary Owens, who I'd worked with at The Music of Your Life. And I remember Gary saying, oh yeah, we're here to support Peter. Also, all the authors of the Encyclopedia of TV Game Shows were there. Steve Ryan, David Schwartz, and Fred Westbrook were there. That was the first time I met them in person. Also, Tom Post and his wife, Suzanne Plachette. We lost Bob Newhart about a week ago, actually 2 weeks ago. And what's funny was that Tom Poston, we best remember him as George Utley on Newhart, at least the younger generations do. But he also appeared a couple of times on the Bob Newhart show as Bob's college buddy, Cliff the Peeper Murdoch. And Suzanne Plachette's character, Emily, Bob's wife, could not stand Cliff. And so the fact that in real life she, before that, had dated Tom Poston in the late 50s, early 60s, and then they went on to marry their longtime spouses. And then when they were both widowed, got back together and got married. So they were a married couple by the time that event happened. And Pete even mentioned in his book about Tom Poston and Suzanne Plachette and just what a wonderful couple they were, along with their former spouses who had passed away. And so I would definitely recommend checking out Pete's book, Backstage with the Original Hollywood Square. And it was a fun event, and I will not forget. Now, I did not get a picture with Peter that night, but I did get a picture with Tom Poston, Tom Kennedy, and also the 3 authors of the Encyclopedia of TV Game Shows, Matt Ottinger, who runs the website BillCullen.net with Ab Nediff. And it was a fun event for everybody. It was just, but however, I did get a picture with Peter about 4 years later at the Game Show Congress. That was the awesome convention that was put on for many years by Paul Bailey. And that year, Peter was the recipient of the Bill Cullen Lifetime Achievement Award. And in the first edition of the Encyclopedia of TV Game Shows, you have Pete on the set of Jeopardy, the original Jeopardy with Art Fleming, along with Bill Cullen and Art James, because all of them were hosting NBC game shows at the time. Even though Squares was made in Burbank, while Jeopardy, Art James' Who, What, or Where game, as well as Bill Cullen's game show, the I Guess, was made in New York City at Rockefeller Center. For the event that Pete did where he was honored, that was a great weekend too. Those game show congresses are events I definitely do miss. The Quiz Show Expo that happened earlier this year, great event too. A little bit different, but still fun. That weekend, Rosemary was there to honor Peter, as well as Meryl Heater of Heater Quigley Productions that produced the Hollywood Squares. So Peter is survived by his wife, Lori, whom he was married to for 35 years. I remember reading somewhere in his bio that they had online, Peter and Lori are best friends. They're avid golfers. And I remember before he signed autographs for his book signing, he and Lori walked by the line of us waiting, and he's like, "Hi, everybody, welcome." And just like, it was really cool that he didn't have to do that, but he did. And so it was a fun event and great talent. And we're going to miss Peter Marshall. Was born Ralph Pierre LaCock, and he's survived by not only Lori, but 3 of his 4 children, as well as many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Just a little bit of an interesting bit of trivia. His son, Pete LaCock, was a baseball player for the Kansas City Royals back in the 1970s. I'm going to give one spoiler to you, but I think it's worth mentioning. Peter said that besides the days that his kids were born, the best day of his life was the day he married Lori. Rest in peace, Peter.